Welcome, colleagues, for joining us tonight for our graphic novels, comics and magazine OU Newsletter Live. A rapid-fire 1 hour of opportunities to hear text recommendations, to hear from our brilliant author in the spotlight tonight, Mark Bradley, interviewed by Richard Ruddick, and to hear about some top text and feature reading group development work, as well as news and research. So it's 7:30, and I think we'll get started. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Where in the world are you? I'm in East Sussex, and we've got colleagues in the room from Norfolk, from London, from Oxford, from Nottingham, from Rochdale, all over. So do please pop your name in the chat line and just say where you are at this moment, including people who are presenting tonight. We'd love to hear from you too in the chat line. Welcome, Erin, who's just joined us too. I'm going to get rolling, as you write. So tonight, we've got an opportunity to hear some top text from Lucy Starbuck Bradley, whose birthday it is today. Happy birthday, Lucy. Then we're hearing some news and research updates from Botanica Research from John and Kelly. Kelly being an OU colleague and John working for Botanica. And then I'm giving a brief update on a new project we just launched yesterday. And then some examples of practice from Imogen and Lucas, and graphic novel top text recommendations from Rich Charlesworth. And then some updates from OU UKLA to reading group leaders, an author in the spotlight we're waiting for, where there's real time for conversation, 20 full minutes rather than the 2 and the 3 that everybody else has been offered. And then finally, Debbie's closing with updates and thanks. And we've got a book wave to close. So if you've got a graphic novel, magazine or comic handy, then be ready to share it with the rest of us. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. It's December. There's a lot else on, but I promise you'll have fun tonight and get some new recommendations to spend your Christmas money on, if you get any, that is. So, moving forward, we're starting with the story. Swapna Paddo and Dapo Adleo. My dad is a grizzly bear. So, we're moving on tonight. And it's happy birthday to Lucy, whose top text she's going to share right now. Over to you, Lucy.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Teresa. I've gone for something old, something new, and something about robots tonight. So my old book is an adaptation of L.M. Montgomery's classic story, Anne of Green Gables. This one's been adapted by Mariah Marsden and the artwork's by Brenna Thumler. And I'm always surprised whenever I pick this up by how good it is. It's a brilliant adaptation. I come to classic fiction adaptations maybe with a little bit of low expectations, but Brenna Thumler is the creator of the Sheets trilogy, and she does an amazing job of using the comic form to its full advantage, creating a stunning sense of time and place and character in this. So something maybe a little bit different to add to your graphic novel collection with this one. My something new is Pedro Martin's Mexikid, which is a graphic memoir telling the story of his Mexican-Americans family, all 9 siblings and parents, who go to collect his grandfather in Mexico in the 80s. It's very clever, the artwork's very beautiful, and captures a really lovely tale of sibling relationships, of generational differences, and also the bonds that we can have across generations. Lots in there about Mexican heritage, and also contains some darker storylines. So definitely, as with everything, one to read yourself first and recommend to the right kind of reader that you know, but definitely recommend it. My final book, I'm an absolutely massive fan of everything that Neil Cameron does, and I love all of his Mega Bros stories. This is the latest one, Carnival Crisis. They come from the Phoenix. They're serialized in the Phoenix, if you know that magazine. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later on as well. It's very clever. The artwork's beautiful. The writing captures, again, those sibling relationships with 2 sentient robot brothers who are regular school kids, or they're trying to be regular school kids, but it's difficult when you're also robot secret agents on the side as well. There's lots of humor. There's lasers. There's robot bad guys. And there's also really sensitive storylines about what it feels like to feel different and try and be accepted in society. And as with all good sci-fi and robot stories, these books are really about what it means to be human, and they're really, really beautiful. So I definitely recommend maybe putting aside your preconceptions about what robot story might be and giving it a read, because it's definitely one to have in your collection and to really extend some of the thoughts maybe of readers that you know. So recommend those. And I am the host and producer of A Comic Boom, the Comics in Education podcast. And I've got interviews with Pedro Martin, and with Neil Cameron on there and lots of other creators, Victoria Jameson, who you might know. So if you're interested in hearing from other teachers, from librarians, Lucas, Richard and Mark, who have spoken tonight, have all been on the podcast. So you can find that on comicboom.co.uk and wherever you get your podcasts. So hopefully those recommendations, there's something there for everyone to pique your interest.
Brilliant. Thank you. What a lot of passion. I already ordered the Anne of Green Gables the other day after we did our rehearsal last Friday. So thank you, Lucy. And now we're moving on to find out about some news and research.
Well, hello there. I think that's me, John Gordon Reid at What on Earth magazine. Is that correct? I hope so.
It is indeed.
Perfect. Thank you for inviting us. We've been doing some work with What on Earth, our new monthly magazine. We launched it about a year and a half ago. It carries only non-fiction content, and we set that in a very highly visual page design. And with it, what we aim to do is we aim to engage a wide audience of about sort of 8 to 14-year-olds. And we do that by stimulating their natural curiosity. And we've been working closely with OU and UKLA teacher reading groups for 2023-24. And amongst other things, we've been providing the groups with publications to share with their members. So that is our magazine. And a little while ago, I requested support from the Open University to help design and evaluate a study. And we've been looking at a 12-week engagement study with 37 pupils from Year 5 from Sir Thomas Abney Primary School over in Hackney. And between April 23 and July 23, the monthly magazine was given to the children on a weekly basis. They were allowed to use it in school as and when they wished, and they could take it home and they could share it with their family and their friends. And with the study being overseen by the OU, of course, we had strict control. We had pupil entry and exit surveys, and they were conducted to ascertain how the reading perceptions, the habits and the behaviors at the home and in the school changed or not. And Kelly, who I think is going to jump in a moment, led pupil focus groups to help gather more detailed information about engagement. And the school supported the parents all the way through with reading at home and took part in their entry and exit surveys as well. And the reaction of the teachers was particularly important to us because we wanted to see if the introduction of the magazine in regular class time did actually have a positive impact. Kelly.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I really enjoyed this opportunity to chat with the pupils at Sir Thomas Abney. And when we looked at the exit surveys, it actually showed that 91% of them were enjoying reading by the end of the study. And they were also requesting more nonfiction and magazines to be available within their own school library. We were initially looking at gender differences, but there wasn't any revelation of a gender difference in terms of engagement with the magazine. The children really enjoyed the magazine. And one thing that was interesting is they actually said that the content was what drove them to read particular articles, not so much the graphics or the photographs. So that was quite an interesting thing we found, John. 91% of the children at the end of the survey were choosing to read the magazines at home, and actually 18% more pupils were choosing to read at home overall than they were at the beginning of the project. We did see some growing informal book talk, but the school's continuing to focus, and most excitingly, 100% of families and children wanted to continue to read and receive the magazine after the study. So you can see some of these lovely quotes here from some of the pupils involved in the study. On the final slide here, we have some thoughts from some of the teachers involved in the study. So you can see that the teachers actually, if you move that one on for me, Teresa, the teachers shared their thoughts on how the children's reading behaviors had changed. Oh, sorry, just a previous one. How their thoughts had changed over the last 12 weeks. And from the first quote, you can see how their interest started to change, more nonfiction reading material, and actually specifically seeking out these reads in the library to complement their magazine reading. So ultimately, these magazine sessions were helping to foster stronger reader-to-reader networks. And it was that social nature of reading that emerged as a catalyst for really engaging the disengaged. And really, these social reading environments started to feed into home. It'd be interesting to see how it develops further. So, John, anything final to add to finish with?
Just to say that we're absolutely delighted with the results that we've found so far and the impact that we seem to have had. And we're in discussions with the OU at the moment regarding some rather radical ideas to further build reader engagement using the magazines. And we're delighted that the OU will be working with us on that journey. And we'd actually love to hear from anybody that might want to be involved in these explorations and experiments. So if you'd like to get involved in the next phase, please just sort of DM me in the chat or drop me an email, john@whatonearth.co.uk. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Yes, I put his contact in the chat if you want to get in touch. So now we have Teresa Cremin sharing the team's findings from a 3-year study on reading and writing for pleasure. I'm sure we'll all be really interested in finding out about this with Mercer's. Over to you, Teresa.
Thanks. Just a couple of minutes. I'm not going to be able to give you the real findings because it took us all day yesterday with 120 people in London to begin to sketch out the framework for practice that we've developed over these 3 years. But we've been working with a wide range of different London-based organisations who are funded by the Mercer's Company, which is a philanthropic company, or it's offering philanthropic resource to support young people in their literacy initiative on reading and writing for pleasure. And so as a team, Helen Hendry, Liz Chamberlain, Sam Holston and I, we looked at a reading for pleasure review and a writing for pleasure review, and then we combined both of those reviews. These are literature reviews, not looking at the programmes at this moment, to try and understand what does the literature say about approaches to developing children as readers and writers, not the skills of reading and writing, but developing that volitional engagement in. And as we all know, the reading for pleasure agenda is well populated by research approaches, but the writing for pleasure agenda is less so, and not articulated in policy and very, very rarely articulated in research. So we had to look for synonyms and so forth going to volitional reading and writing. And then we developed an understanding from these 6 fabulous programmes, including World Book Day, Get Islington Reading, Primary Shakespeare Company, Ministry of Story, and Doorstep Library, all of whom do different things but seek to support young people. And we used activity theory to understand the ways in which those organisations worked. We synthesised the data across that and then worked to combine both the research literature and the understandings from these 6 programmes into a combination that eventually resulted in the reading and writing for pleasure framework. And I hope you'll be interested to hear that in the summer, on the 15th, I think it is, of June, we're offering a reading and writing for pleasure conference in the OU to explicate those findings in a bit more detail and to share with you the final framework. We launched yesterday that final reading and writing for pleasure framework for practice and the approaches, the executive summary, which isn't quite yet available, the exact summary of research literature on our website, but it will be soon. But the framework is, and Kelly can put a link to that. And then we'll also launch the special initiative report. We were delighted to have Onyinye Iwu illustrating our work. And we're actually moving forward across the next 5 years, working with different companies in secondary and in primary, trying to understand the role of talk within developing as a reader and a writer. So that gives you a quick update on that. And now I'm moving on from the research update to listen and to learn from Imogen Maud, who's going to give us an example of practice. Imogen comes from Surrey, and please, Imogen, tell me when you want me to move you on, as it were. Welcome.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm a TRG leader, and last year I did my example of practice all about the graphic novel club that we ran at our school. The club launched initially because we noticed that a lot of children were becoming hooked on comics, magazines, graphic novels, and we really wanted to harness their enthusiasm for that type of text, but also give children an opportunity to talk about graphic novels, maybe in more depth than they would get in their normal classroom settings. Initially, the club had 14 children, which it was oversubscribed, but we didn't want to make it too big. We wanted to get those relationships with the children. It was quite a diverse group. There were children on the SEN register, children who were sort of greater depth readers, children that had read a lot of graphic novels, some that had read very few and wanted to learn about more. And some children chose to come to the club because they wanted to read, just sit with a friend and read, or sit by themselves in a cozy corner and read every week. And others came because they wanted to create their own graphic novels. to circulate on World Book Day, which they did, and they were very proud of. But I would start the club every week with a little extract of a graphic novel that I thought maybe they hadn't seen, just to widen their exposure, and then they would have time to sort of explore by themselves. Please, could you go to the next slide, Teresa? Thank you. The impact of the club was really huge, and it's still ongoing in our school. There's been a huge uptake of graphic novels going out of the library. We barely have any on the shelf in our school library, which is very frustrating for our librarian, but great for us. And we have a school Padlet, which children can update at home with their recommendations, and it's ended up, from the time we started the club, the impact of the club on lots of year groups has been that now it's about 80% of our Padlet is just filled with graphic novels, which is great. All the children that came to the club ended up reading far more graphic novels or comics than they had when they first started going. So did lots of their peer groups as well. They also loved going to read extracts for the younger children, so we've had to invest in a lot more graphic novels for Key Stage 1, Year 3 and Year 4, and there have been requests from children in their younger year groups for their clubs, for a club for them as well. At the same time, our staff book group were reading graphic novels from the Empathy Lab list, so that we could talk to the children about the books that they were reading, join in with some of their conversations about the books, and that was really powerful. And then it sort of all accumulated. We managed our local indie bookshop, who are really great, managed to get us John Patrick Green in from the Investigators series in the summer term. And that was a huge success. He's, you know, completely starstruck some of our children, and he left some of his illustrations in the library. And it's, you know, the Investigators craze is ongoing at school. So I just really wanted to summarize in saying that it's a very easy club to run in any school if you can get some graphic novels in and have a basket of them as a starting point. But the impact on maybe your avid readers, but also your reluctant readers and those that find reading chapter books a little bit more challenging, the impact is huge, and it's had a rolling effect. So
we just want to add, Imogen, I'm sure it's not the books themselves only that make the difference. It's the way you ran that club and gave the young people volition, agency, choice. You don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. You can make choices. And then the Padlet that began to spread it, and the staff. So don't put your wide range of strategies to support down there. The books can never do it on their own, however good they are. But thank you. That's the Investigators, John Patrick Green. For anybody who doesn't know that series, it's stunning and very popular across different year groups. Next, we're turning then to Lucas Maxwell, who's from Glenthorne School in Surrey, who's going to be sharing an example of his own practice as you develop. Lucas, to guide me to when you want me to move on.
Sure. Thanks very much. Thanks for, just stay on here. That's great. I'll just talk about, sorry, I know I don't have much time. I'll talk about ways I've incorporated graphic novels very kind of, basically into the library lessons that we get. I'm very lucky we have these library lessons that are timetabled in for years 7, 8, 9. And I've done things recently where I've just given tables, piles of graphic novels, and just to introduce some of the students to them. And they do things like each table they're in a hot, it's a typical kind of like you see these kind of not icebreaker, but kind of like icebreaker things or whatever, team building things in these horrible corporate settings where they have to do these, but you can do them with books that are really fun, where they're in a hot air balloon and the hot air balloon is sinking and they have to unload everything, and they have to unload every comic book or every graphic novel except for one, and it creates a lot of debate amongst the tables. And we had of course a table that did one girl, year 7 girl, said this balloon is going to crash because she would not give up one of the comics. So stuff like that I like to do just to introduce them to the comics, to the graphic novels. And there's some here on the screen you can see, like Wildfire by Brina Bard is absolutely amazing. Brina Bard has another one called Trespassers, which is about kids who go on holiday and they're convinced that the cottage next to them, there's an axe murderer in there. It's really, really funny and cool. And Wildfire is more serious. And it's about losing their home in a fire. Four Eyes, which I just finished by Rex Ogle, was absolutely amazing. It's taken in the I guess late 80s, early 90s. maybe before that, when getting glasses was a big deal. I remember when I had to get mine, and it really struck home. But it also resonates with kids today because it's about being kind of like standing out like a sore thumb in school, and just having attention on you that you don't want. And I wanted to talk quickly also. So I do these with library lessons, but I also I do these one-off things on a Saturday, which have been really popular, where I run these like little mini Comic-Con conventions. And Comic-Con is a very loose word because they sign up for it, they come, I have food. I create little stations where they can kind of like, of course, with parental permission, they can pose in front of like a comic book style setting. It's hard to, I should have had a picture, but it's got like zap, pow, and they can like do like they're like punching each other or whatever. It's like a little comic book station, and they can dress up, which is really cool. I have little like Rock'em Sock'em robot things that they can play. I have make your own comic book bookmarks station. I can send all the links to all this stuff where they make their own bookmarks out of comic books. I hire a badge maker, which really isn't that much. And they can make badges and pins and stuff out of comic books. So I went to a comic book shop in Croydon, and I just said, "Look, can you give me some comics?" And they said, "Sure." Here, go out. I drove my car out back, and they literally gave me like 300 comic books. And just for me going, I had no idea I thought they would say no. And I gave them away. Everyone got a free comic. And I used some of them for for comic book crafts and stuff like that, which was really cool. And then I just reached out to staff. I was really pleasantly surprised that we had a staff member who had a partner who does voices for like YouTube, like Dragon Ball Z things and stuff like that, and can do any voice. And he just came for free. You know, it just was by asking around. I just got all these people to come, and a lot of staff came. And we did crafts and events, and I did hire a comic book artist and stuff like that. And it's been really popular. Comics have absolutely just exploded. So talking about books like Things in the Basement by Ben Hatke and The Light by Brenda Thumler, that artist or that author was talked about recently. Faith Erin Hicks's new one, who's a great Canadian comic book artist. Hockey Girl Loves Drama Boy. Anybody who loves Heartstopper, they're gonna love this one. It's really, really good. I mean, there's tons. Things in the Basement by Ben Hatke is about a boy who's sent down to the basement to retrieve his baby sister's socks, and he gets in the basement and everything comes to life, and he goes on this really kind of cool adventure. Four Eyes I've talked about. Wait Till Helen Comes is one that I cannot keep on the shelves. It's a graphic novel horror that's adapted from an older novel.
You've
super
got about
creepy.
30 seconds. I'm going to be tough on you.
That's fine. That's fine, Teresa. 30 seconds. So
Well, maybe a minute.
No, that's cool. So these books, these comics are definitely our most popular. Something like Wait Till Helen Comes, which I should have put a photo on. Is about a family that moves to a new house. There's a cemetery, and one of the sisters, a stepsister, is seen muttering and mumbling to a grave, and she starts to tell on the other kids, and they don't like her. And then all she says to them is, "Just wait till Helen comes." It's super creepy, and the kids love it. They absolutely love it. So I'm just trying to insert them in any way I can through these library lessons, through big events and things like that. So it's been absolutely amazing to see, and that'll be my time. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for sharing how creating these opportunities is making a difference to the young people's engagement and their fascination with it all. So thank you. We're turning over now to some top texts from I'm turning to Kelly, I think, to talk about this piece. Kelly, are you on?
Or
Yes.
even Debbie.
It's Debbie.
I beg your pardon, Debbie.
Just a quick mention of our Reading Schools programme, simply because lots of you are running TRGs or taking part in TRGs, which might be you as an individual developing your practice. But you may not know that we run a Reading Schools programme, which is an opportunity for you to work on a leadership level to develop a whole school reading culture. And that might be in a primary context. So we have a programme that's been running for the last 8 years in primary schools up and down the country. But we also now, this year, Kelly and a group of colleagues have been running a Key Stage 3 Reading Schools programme. from this year, which has been hugely successful for those schools to engage with developing reading for pleasure across a secondary context. So we would invite you and welcome you to come and join us for some briefing meetings in the spring term to find out more if you want to do some whole school development work around reading for pleasure. So that's just a little bit of a plug. And I think, Teresa, if you move the slide on, there's some information there if people want to get involved. There is information on our website as well. If you don't get time to scan the QR code now, you can sign up for a briefing meeting. But I'm going to hand over now because I know Rich is itching to share probably more than 3, probably more than his allotted number in terms of the number of books he's allowed to share. But Rich, go on, over to Rich Charlesworth.
I've got about 6 or 7, but I've tried to keep it to 3. So basically the first one I haven't been able to get hold of in person. We have the Phoenix, which is delivered into school, and I'd have to prize it out of the hands of a child to sort of bring it home to share this evening. Lots of you may know it already, and the starting ground of lots of comic artists, lots of homegrown talent. You've heard already from Lucy about Neil Cameron's Mega Robo Bros, Jamie Smart's Bunny vs. Monkey, and lots of, it's just a really good opportunity to widen the repertoire that children can access in terms of high quality comics. And I think it's really important to mention, like, yes, they're action packed. Yes, they're adventure filled and full of comedy. But there's so much more than just kind of the comics being seen as just for reluctant readers. And I think there's language, there's empathy, there's emotions in graphics. And I really think that sort of exposing sort of children to as much wide variety of this genre is really, really important. After the Phoenix, I've got a fantastic graphic novel to share, which is The First Time for Everything. Probably, like Lucy mentioned, I'd probably have a read through first. I'd probably pitch it upper key stage 2, definitely more into secondary. A lovely, tender exploration into masculinity and boyhood. I think that's not something that's been missing, but definitely sort of an area within graphic novels that I've really responded to, and I know lots of readers have as well. The kind of tagline for this, I think, is Fanta, Fondue and First Love, which if you want a kind of recommendation, that's probably what I'd go for. And my final text that I wanted to share, I couldn't get away with just without doing a picture book. And this one is called My Strange Shrinking Parents. This is from an Australian illustrator and author. I won't read the whole thing, won't do it justice, but just the end papers. I'll try and get them so you can see a load of different china and teapots. And it says, for the dedication to my immigrant parents, and to all parents who burden and narrow their own lives in the hope that their children will be free to go further. It's quite a surreal sort of for fans of Sean Tan. It explores beautifully how parents sort of give so much for their children. And out of sort of every single opportunity, this young immigrant who's written the story, his parents have to sort of give part of their height so they get smaller and smaller. It's beautifully illustrated, very heartfelt and emotional. I've marked up loads of pages for my graphics as well, but I feel like we've got to get and make as much time as possible for Mark and Richard's discussion. But yeah, those are my 3 that I eventually went for. So thank you.
Thank you, Rich. And I really endorse that Strange Shrinking Parents. I actually bought 3 copies for colleagues for Christmas because it's just so beautiful. Well, my son's having a baby, so he gets one anyway. So is he going to shrink us? Question mark. Okay, we're now moving on to some OU UKLA reading group updates, and we're starting off with Katie Bland, who's actually standing in very generously for Claire McGreevy tonight, who runs the Rochdale TRG. So thank you, Katie, for joining us at the 11th hour. It's really kind of you, and I'm passing over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Claire's very sorry that she can't be here tonight, but she has come up with this amazing graphic novels project, which is running in collaboration with the virtual schools in Rochdale. She's just got a new job, and that is part of it. So we decided to link it with our TRG and use our TRG schools to be able to do this. It's mainly it's extra sessions on top of our TRG to help our most vulnerable readers, and using graphic novels for that as John and Kelly were saying before, you know, reluctant readers, vulnerable readers, this is the best, you know, graphic novels are the best one to do with them. We're very, very lucky. Claire has worked phenomenally to get Richard Ruddock and John Biddle, who I think are both here tonight, and Helen Jones to come in and run some CPD with our schools. We're going to link those with library visits to promote the library as well. And then it's going to culminate in Chris Mould is going to be working with the schools to do illustrations so it can develop our own graphic novel. We're also making it relevant to Rochdale as well. Our town hall has just been renovated, so he's going to start a series of comics that we are all going to create together, which is Rochdale Town Hall, The Untold Stories. And as part of the project, the classes that are taking part are going to be going to Rochdale Town Hall to have a look, get some ideas, and then Chris is going to help them develop that into their own graphic novel as well, which will then hopefully be on sale in the Rochdale Town Hall gift shop as well. So we're going to be published authors by the end of it. And all this is going to be part of the research for virtual schools as well. So like I say, looking at those vulnerable children, and it's for year 4 and year 5.
Thank you, Katie, so much. It's been wonderful. Claire McGreevy set up the original Rochdale TRG. They've created the Rochdale Reading Festival for children out of that TRG. Katie's become a co-leader in it and has actually recently won the Farshore Experienced Teacher Award. So all good things are happening. And now we find out that they're going to be creating their own graphic novel with author and illustrator Chris Mould. So exciting. I can't just feel wowzers. This is amazing.
We're very excited. Very excited.
Understandably. So I'm now going to hand over to Lizzie Greeley, who's a Nottingham-based teacher reading group leader who works at Nottingham Trent University and has been leading a TRG for 3 years. So thank you, Lizzie, for that. And over to you to share what you've been up to in the Nottingham Trent group.
Great, thank you. Warm welcome from Nottingham Trent's teacher reading group. We've had 3 sessions already this term, the most recent one being this evening, and we've regularly about 20 members turn up to that, and it's definitely been a year of first for us this time, because we've had our first launch event. We've not run a launch event before, and we found that really great in terms of kick-starting this teacher reading group for this academic year. And we've got a really good solid base of students and staff and members from external schools coming to join us. It's also been face-to-face for the first time, because we started our teacher reading groups during the lockdown period. So this is the first time we've had a face-to-face launch, and our first session was both face-to-face as well. We're doing a kind of blended approach during the dark winter months, and then we're going back to face-to-face once the light nights come again. We had our first launch session in our teaching building, and we were really excited to explore the books in our book box. It was very much like Christmas coming early for us, and we had a lovely time. If you just want to move the slide on, please, Teresa, some pictures there of us sharing those books together. And that was a really nice informal start. And then we moved to a teaching room and we explored the OU RfP website so that we could help our new members see just what is on there in terms of support with some of the things in that website area. So that was really great. What was also lovely was to have our 3 reading ambassadors with us, which you can see there in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. That's another initiative that the OU UKLA put out there, that Reading for Pleasure initiative, getting our 3 student ambassadors, and they're working with their cohort of year 3 students to try and encourage reading for pleasure. And they're going to be doing some work during our fundraising week next week, running some workshops around reading for pleasure. If you'd like to move on again, please, that'd be great. So, you know, it's been a kind of journey running a teacher reading group. I was very, very nervous and anxious in that first year we ran it, and I feel like I've grown in confidence with my fellow team members here at the university. And we've enjoyed having a range of visiting speakers, poets and librarians. And in fact, at our session just last month, we had a member of the Education Library Service come to give a talk about the power of book awards to inspire reading for pleasure. We always make sure we have a research focus at each of our sessions. And over the last couple of sessions, we've explored the National Literacy Trust's report on children and young people's reading. And we've also explored the Future of Primary Libraries report put out by the National Literacy Trust as well. Our focus for this year is about developing social reading environments. And that's because as a university, we are hoping to create what we're going to call an inspirational reading hub, which is there to encourage reading for pleasure and to model what reading for pleasure might look like in a sort of social space here at the university. And we have set ourselves the target of writing that up as an example of practice by the end of the year.
Thank you, Liz. It's great to hear about TRGs running in universities, but also in collaboration with teachers as well. What super work. Well, now I have the privilege of passing over to, but not interviewing, Mark Bradley, and Richard Ruddick is going to take us forward into this space. So, Lucy, do you want me to take the, Debbie, do you want me to take the screen down, or am I still going here?
Take it down.
Take it down, Mrs. Stop share. I'll just be dying to look at those books. But now we get the real people.
I was hoping to hide behind the screen.
Not a chance of that. Handing over to Richard Ruddick, who's one of our leading lights across the country, probably the leading light in graphic novels, not only on X, and X it used to be called Twitter, but in other contexts too. I've had the privilege of working with Rich in a couple of conferences. He hives out of the school where John Biddle is at Moorlands, but now he's moved himself and is going to be interviewing Mark Bradley. So over to you, Rich.
Well, thank you ever so much, Teresa. It's a privilege to be here, and I shall accept your wonderful compliments. I don't often think of myself as a leading light. So let's get straight into the reason I think we're all here, which is we want to hear from the man himself, Mark Bradley. I think, Mark, I'm going to start with just explaining that today I had 3 Year 6 girls fighting over Bumble and Snug stickers that had been in my drawer for several years, and I'd forgotten were there. And then one of them lost one on the playground, and they were still moaning about it all afternoon.
But if you DM me and I'll send you through some more.
But it just shows that the impact the books actually have, because you know, they've been reading them together, and I said, oh, you know, I'm actually going to be speaking to him soon, and they were pretending they weren't interested, and then a couple of them were trying to come tonight, and then they found these stickers, and then they were all talking about it, but they kept bringing it back to how much they enjoyed their books, which I think is a key as to why you're here tonight, because your books really do connect with readers, and actually they connect with the people who see people reading them, because you can see the joy it brings to them and experience. So I think to give us a bit of a picture before I delve into some questions, it'd be really good just to get a bit of an idea of who you are, how we got to this stage where we're eagerly awaiting Bumble and Snug 4, and kind of what goes on behind those two crazy characters and the man that creates them.
Thank you for all the lovely words there, and it's a pleasure to get to speak with you, and you are one of the leading lights. It's inspiring, genuinely inspiring as a comic creator to see the work that you sell, that you do, and read up on it. It's for a medium that's had such a kind of bumpy history in terms of public perception. It's genuinely, and myself as a comic reader, it's genuinely exciting to see the work that's going out there. Yourselves and teachers doing it. In terms of Bumble and Snug, so I've accidentally fallen into all of this. I'm a lifelong administrator. I've been in the civil service for most of my life, and public sector and charity sectors for most of it. I did 10 years in the courts for the probation service, which was fascinating. Absolutely loved that job. Went through the privatisation part of it, which we won't talk about here, and everything like that. But during all my life, I've been a comic reader. It's one of those things when you're doing school visits and everything like that, people ask you, why did you carry on reading comics? The question makes no sense to me as a question whenever I get asked anything in that. I'm like, I don't understand what you're supposed to do with your life if you're not reading comics. I don't say that in a snide way. I can't imagine what life looks like without comics. Comics sunk their teeth into me. I loved reading the Beano and everything like that, but then Calvin and Hobbes reading that in the back of my grandma's newspapers sunk its teeth into me so hard. And then onto Sandman, all the Vertigo stuff in the 90s from DC, and then onto the alternative press stuff. So I was making comics all that time because I was in love with animation as a kid and comics. And again, one of the questions you get asked when you do school visits and things like that, oh, why did you draw? And again, my wife will tell me if I'm getting antsy that I need to go draw for a little bit, because it usually means that I haven't drawn for a few days and I don't realize it. So I don't understand what you're supposed to do when you're not making comics. I've been making web comics and little zines for my friends all my life, and just giving them out. And then I eventually did a little web comic which was called Bug Bops, which featured Bumble and Snug, which was done in a very sketchy style. And I got approached by, and that was about that was first year Oliver was born, so a couple of years after I left the probation, working the probation service, and a publisher approached me about making books for those. And in that first meeting we had with them, we started discussing about emotional literacy, because working in the courts, I used to deal with all the pre-sentencing reports and everything like that. And one of the things kept coming back to was emotional literacy as a theme throughout, consistent throughout so much, and the difficulties a lot of people struggled that were going through the criminal justice system, and particularly how men deal with emotional literacy. Obviously, everyone here will be very conscious of that. So that in that first meeting, we discussed emotional literacy and the stuff that I'd learned through probation service, and about whether we could sort of make those the center of the graphic novels we've done with the publisher. So anyway, I started going about and pitching through that publisher, and that led to Bumble and Snug sort of coming along. And it's all happened by accident. I never really intended to get into publishing. I was happy just doing my little web comics. So it's a deeply infuriating thing to say to some people who've been trying to get into publishing for years, but I've accidentally fallen into it. Which is really annoying to some people. I'm sorry. There's a real but yeah, and then that's I'm now 4 and a bit years into that, and I'm breaking off for this conversation from working on Bumble and Snug and the Jealous Giants, which is Bumble and Snug book 4. I've got my deadlines in a month for that, and I'm working every second under the sun on that, because I've given myself like 1,000,000,001 crowd scenes to draw in that. Which is, not, if you're ever, pro tip if you want to be a comic artist, don't give yourself a load of crowd scenes to draw in a book. As I was writing it, I was like, I'm going to hate myself for writing this, and drawing me does hate writing, but I also do love drawing them. So yeah, I'm trying to throw everything that I can at them, because the sort of space that Bumble and Snug occupy within comics, which is sort of the stuff like Baloney and Friends and Narwhal and Jelly, which are really brilliant introductions to the medium. Or I say introductions, kids are getting introduced to panel structures in picture books, but in sort of traditional comic sense, Narwhal and Jelly, Baloney and Friends and books like that, mine's kind of visually the next sort of step along in between that and like Bunny versus Monkey and things like that. So like, trying to bring a lot of my thoughts about how children process images and learn to read comics into it. And I'm also trying to do ridiculously complex artwork and shoot myself in the foot for about how much work I've got to do on there. Yes.
It's all well appreciated, though, I promise you. So it's stunning when it's finished. And I think there's quite a lot of people in this group that are probably thinking, I wish I could accidentally fall into writing several books. I just want to touch on something actually you said. I was thinking about the emotional literacy side.
Yes.
And I was thinking about perhaps the argument that comes that comics and graphic novels are not necessarily considered proper reading, as some people like to put it. So why perhaps do you think, or what is it about the medium perhaps that supports being able to deliver a message like that? Because I think of Bumble and Snug as each one has a clear kind of theme and sort of moral that comes across, but comes across very naturally. So whether it be the shy ghost talking about making each other confident and empowering, or thinking about the kind of unicorn and the excitement overload, and then actually being tolerant of others and considering our actions, I think it comes across really well, but it doesn't feel like a kind of preachy message. So why do you think the format lends itself effectively to do that, and isn't a kind of just a distraction for naughty boys, as some people seem to think it still is?
Two things on that. One, I think that we need to, we're obviously talking about reading for pleasure a lot, and we need to understand what we're actually saying by the word reading, because traditionally it's interpreted as reading prose. That is not what reading is. Reading is the processing of visual information. Prose text, it's a very it's an attempt to draw sounds, and it's a secondary form of information. It's a secondary form of communication, where the actual sounds are the things we're trying to communicate. We're actually trying to visualize sounds on there. That's the reason why the word cat doesn't look like a cat. We're trying to communicate the sound cat. So anyone saying children aren't reading when they're looking at images needs to think about what they're actually saying in relation to that. Children, we've got three primary forms of communication as a species: audio, drawn, and gestural. And all those can be codified into various things. Like gestural can be sign language, it can be dance. Audio can be spoken, it can be music or anything. Drawn, it can be drawings. We can eventually try to codify a different one into writing prose, writing text, and things like that. We can do it into sequential art. We can do it into IKEA instructions. We can do it into Lego manuals and things like that. So children are reading images, and we're actually missing a beat, and by perhaps forcing them into reading prose as the main form, and why there's an issue I have a major issue with calling comic readers reluctant readers. They're not, they're voracious readers. It's just we're not finding the right form to suit them. And I'm saying that as someone that's an extremely visual thinker. I was a voracious prose reader as a kid, but I maintain the Alice in Wonderland quote of what's the use of a book without pictures and conversations. Like, I was gutted every time I read a book that wasn't about that. In terms of why they can communicate, why children connect with them, I think we're using one of the primary forms of communication as a species. We're using drawings. We don't teach children how. We do actually sort of teach children how to read drawings, but we don't formally teach them. They don't get taught in school, here's how to process this image in the same way. I've got a 7-year-old son, the same way that he's getting taught writing in school. He's just expected to understand it through I read him 3 picture books a night for every single night of his life so far. Although literally in the last couple of nights, he's asked us to stop reading to him so he can read the Bunny versus Monkey books, which I'm literally having to prise out of his hands. I'm having to force him to stop reading them to get ready for school in the morning. It's that obsessed with them. We're speaking to them on their level. Children get pictures as a communication tool in a way that they don't get prose. So when we can combine those two things together, it's a powerhouse of information. And I think that one of the things, I'm going to get a little bit nebulous here, because the next projects that I'm working on, hopefully after Bumble and Snug, is going to be, I'm trying to formulate a bunch of ideas as to whether reading is a form of play. Whether with play, as you guys have all seen, it's essentially, generally it's understood as having fun, spontaneous things like that. But children, when they're playing, they're testing the boundaries of stuff. They're testing their own boundaries, their own emotional, physical boundaries, the rules around them and everything like that. And whether reading is a form of play, because essentially we're using it to expand our emotional lexicon, our imaginative lexicon, everything like, and testing these boundaries about what's real, what's not, what are the rules, what can I imagine, things like that. And I think that images are essentially a primary form of this communication. Kids get it. Now, one of the fascinating things I did with my son, I'd never thought about it before stupidly, was I started asking him when he was 5, bearing in mind he's grown up with a comic creator for a dad, what he actually understood about the images, because I'm just reading to him. I never asked him, do you understand what a speech bubble is? understand what these lines sticking out of a character's head are? Do you understand what all of this means? And he didn't. I just expected him to understand that stuff. But I do know that he's now reading stuff that I've never taught him in other comics, and he's just picked up on what it understands. So kids get images, they read into them to connect them. There's a certain play that they can have with reality that and the reality of the page that prose simply can't replicate. And so I think it fits the overall set scale and shape of their imagination and the way that they process stuff better than prose can. But like I say, when you can combine imagery and words together, like in picture books, like in comics, then they supercharge each other. I'm just rambling. You'll have to forgive me. Working on deadlines, my brain just turns to mush at the moment.
Well, it's fascinating to hear, especially the concept of thinking about it as play, perhaps, and taking a kind of different approach. One thing I was thinking kind of quickly is, do you think with a more screen-based world then now, this discussion of the kind of visual and how they can understand it, there's often a complaint I get at school of the children won't read anything else other than a graphic novel now, almost like they're addicted to them. Do you think that's partly because they're kind of exposed to it more, so this is a good way to engage them with reading because it's what they know?
The scourge of comics. I don't think that's the case, because you've got to look at the historical sales data for comics. So back in the 60s and 70s, if anyone was going to the newsagents back then, so 60s, late 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, newsstands were full of comics, absolutely full of them. The comic sales were incredible. They were selling millions of copies of issues. There's some arguments at the time about whether girls' comics was what labeled girls' comics at the time were selling more than boys' comics. Some people say they were. It depends on how you interpret the data, but either way, boys and girls were reading tons of comics in this country, and they were in the US as well. They died off because the newsstands started dying off with the advent of TV and Saturday morning. What we're seeing now is, with the resurgence of graphic novels and enthusiasm for them, it's the natural state of it. It's not that children are enthusiastic for comics if they're provided with them in the right format, in the right spaces to buy them. And again, I think it all comes back to that primacy of how they process images, because they can connect with them and they read them, and we teach them from day zero through board books, picture books, how to process these things through animation, everything else. So they connect with them. I think comics being popular and being well read is the natural state of things for kids.
Yeah, and I think the providing thing is key, because I know there's been, where I live, there's been complaints at times in the past that, oh, this bookshop isn't good enough because it only has these 3 graphic novels or something. And then those same stores have now increased their selection, and children are far more enthused about going there and are looking to. And I think you get less of the parent perhaps who's like, oh, we'll get a proper book. And, you then go and see what they pick up and think, well, is that any different? Where does the properness come in? I'm conscious we've only got a couple of minutes. I'm going to try and squeeze.
You've probably got 1 minute, so go
1
for
minute.
it.
We've got 1 minute. I'm going to try to squeeze in a very important one. That is, I think the characters in your book are so relatable because they are so very down to earth, and they do what we do. Is that kind of an intentional choice to bring readers in, or is that just you trying to write from your personal experience and provide a lived experience for readers, which should in theory be more understandable?
It's a bunch of different influences that are in there. With Laurel and Hardy are absolutely in their classic comedic doubles, absolutely part of it. The shape of the characters, I've mentioned this before, Bumble's an exclamation mark, Snug looks like a question mark, like that formulates into their personalities. It's how to approach the emotions. But when I was doing the webcomic, it's just 2 characters that I really like drawing and writing, and they're based entirely on those webcomic characters. Bumble and Snug were the main characters. That webcomic comes out of Calvin Hobbes, everything like that. So yeah, but I think it gives children easy things to identify to extreme personality types, as to ones to latch onto and understand sort of iconography of like individual characters as to that they can see how those two characters work fairly easily. So it works well for that, I'd hope, anyway. When I do it right, it works like that.
It certainly works very well. I think it's interesting to say about comedic duo, because I think they are brilliant together, and there's never it's time for Bumble to do this now. They kind of both move with the story, and they have their moments suit their personality, which is so refreshing to see, rather than it kind of being forced into, they have to be the one that solves this problem, and then he has to be the one that solves that, which is lovely. Right, I'm going to hand back over now, Teresa, before I get told off for going over my time. But thank you, Mark.
Well, you haven't run over your time, but it's been absolutely fabulous to listen to you both. The chat line's been bursting with kind of how much we're learning about the power of play and visual images. Thank you, Mark. Really great deal for joining us. And thank you, Richard, for taking this fabulous opportunity to interview the gentleman before us. The history of what you did before blew my brain a bit. I'm thinking, no, I wasn't expecting that. But we're passing back over now to Debbie, who's going to finish the session for us with some observations about things that are happening next. So over to you, Debbie.
Yes, just some quick updates to let you know to save some dates. So UKLA have got their international conference coming up in July. So save the date for that and do visit their website. There'll be more information about that coming up for you. And we'll send out links to TRG leaders as well for booking. And then on the next slide, very excitingly, is our next conference. So we are going to be in Sneinton Primary in Nottingham with Julie and her team for Book Chatter Matters, and we'll be joined by Tom Percival, which will be a really fantastic opportunity to hear another children's author speak to us. And lots of you are familiar, I know, with Tom's work. So going to be great, and lots of workshops for you to attend, of course, as well. So that will be on Saturday, the 16th of March in the spring. We also have a save the date for our summer conference. So looking even further ahead, save Saturday, the 15th of June. We will be back in Milton Keynes for another conference around reading and writing for pleasure, joined by a whole host of stars from across different organisations to do workshops, but also some keynotes. And Teresa, are we allowed to announce who's joining us?
I think we are allowed to announce. You know, you can say it.
Yeah, so we're going to be joined by Matt Goodfellow, who I know many of you have been reading the final year. So Matt is joining us for our summer conference as well. So please do save the date. That just leaves us to say a huge thank you to everybody that's contributed this evening. So particularly Mark, we really appreciate your time, and Richard for hosting with us this evening. Really appreciate you taking time out, but also to all our other contributors, Lucy, Kelly, Imogen, Lucas, Rich, Katie, Lizzie, all of you for everything you've contributed to this evening's event. We've got time for a book wave. I'm sure people will want a book wave. So
Can we just also say a big thank you to John Gordon Reed, who's been giving the TRG groups fabulous copies of the Britannica, and who joined us again tonight. And he isn't in education in the conventional sense. So thank you, John, in particular from me.